So this happened back in 2009. Chloe and I had just finished our sophomore year, and we decided to do a day hike in the Willamette National Forest. You know, just get away from everything. I mean, we weren't exactly experienced outdoors types, but we'd printed out a trail map and grabbed some snacks. I was driving my beat-up Toyota Corolla, and Florence Plus to the Machine was blasting from the speakers. Dog days are over. It felt like the perfect start to a perfect day. We stopped at this small gas station right at the forest entrance to fuel up and buy junk food. I remember Chloe grabbing a bag of hot Cheetos and joking about how they'd stain her fingers orange for the next week. Everything was chill until I noticed the guy. He was standing by an old blue sedan, just watching us. Mid-40s maybe, with a faded, dusty blue work jacket. A Carhartt, I think. He wasn't pumping gas, wasn't on his phone, just staring. Not aggressively, but constantly. I didn't know then that the man in the faded blue jacket would follow us into the heart of the woods and into our nightmares for years to come. I told myself he was probably just some local lost in thought. Maybe he recognized us from somewhere, or maybe he was just zoning out. So anyway, we paid, got back in the car, and I remember laughing a little too loudly at something Chloe said, trying to shake the weird feeling. As we pulled onto the forest road, I checked the rearview mirror. He was still standing there, not moving. I mean, it was nothing. It had to be nothing. The pine and gasoline smell mixed in the warm air as we left the station behind. I rolled down the window, letting the wind and gravel noise fill the silence. But yeah, I didn't look in the mirror again. Not until much later. The hike itself was, I guess, uneventful. A few miles of winding trails, tall pines, and that damp, earthy smell you only get deep in the woods. We'd practically forgotten about the guy at the gas station, because, I mean, it was just a word, right? A stare. Big deal. But when we finally made it back to the parking area a few hours later, the sun was starting to dip, and the lot was empty except for our Corolla. Something felt off even before we got close. I couldn't figure out what it was at first. Then Chloe froze. There were scratches all over the hood. Not random scratches, letters. Someone had dragged something sharp, maybe a key or a blade, through the red paint, carving deep into the metal. It spelled out Hello. I remember the silence hit us both. Just the rustle of leaves in the afternoon breeze and that damp earth smell that suddenly felt heavy, like it was pressing in. Chloe whispered if it was a joke. I mean, my brain immediately tried to find a reason. Local teenagers maybe, bored kids messing around. But yeah, it felt wrong. The scratches were deliberate, too neat. And hello? Who writes that? It wasn't a threat. It was an invitation. I touched the letters with my fingertip, and the metal was still warm from the sun, but the word was cold somehow. I glanced around the tree line. Nothing moved, just those shadows between the trunks. I whispered to Chloe that we needed to get out of there. She was already reaching for her phone, but you know, no signal. I mean, of course not. We were miles deep, so we just stood there listening. And that's when I heard it. Not quite a rustle, but a definite snap of a twig from somewhere behind the car. Like someone shifting their weight, trying not to be seen. I held my breath. We both spun around, and my heart just stopped. The man from the gas station was walking toward us from the tree line. Slowly. He had the same faded blue Carhartt jacket, and I could see a dark oil stain on one sleeve. His hands hung at his sides, but one of them was holding something. A small axe. A hatchet, I guess. He didn't rush. He just stepped out into the little clearing like he'd been waiting for us all afternoon. His boots crunched on the gravel, and the metallic glint of the hatchet blade caught the last light filtering through the trees. My whole body went rigid. I couldn't move. He stopped maybe 15 feet away and tilted his head. Then he spoke, calm and flat, like he was asking for the time. He asked if we'd seen his chainsaw, said he dropped it somewhere around here. I remember thinking how absurd that sounded. There was no chainsaw. There was no reason for him to be out here. but he just stood there waiting for an answer, like it was a normal question. The forest had gone completely silent, not even a bird. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Chloe's hand clamped onto my arm so hard I could feel her nails through my jacket. The man took one step closer. The hatchet swung gently in his grip, and I could smell something metallic mixed with the pine, like old oil or something worse. And then he just waited. His eyes never left us. I swear he wasn't blinking. The whole world shrank down to that stupid question and the sound of our shallow breathing. I wondered if I said no, would he just leave? Or if I said yes, would he believe me? I didn't have an answer, so we just stood there frozen, while the darkness between the trees seemed to grow wider and deeper around us. I don't remember who moved first. I think it was Chloe. She grabbed my wrist so hard I felt the bones grind. And then we were running, not toward the car, that was too close to him, but into the trees, following that faded wooden sign we'd seen earlier. Willamette NF. Info post, 1 mile. The letters were half peeled off, but that direction was burned into my brain. So we just ran, like blind. I don't even remember thinking. Branches whipped across my face and arms, and I could hear the snap of twigs under our feet, under his feet behind us. He wasn't sprinting, he was just walking, but somehow he kept up. Every time I heard a branch break, my legs pumped harder. My lungs were burning, and the heavy breathing was so loud in my ears I couldn't tell if it was mine or Chloe's. The forest was a blur of green and shadow. I kept thinking he wasn't really chasing us, you know? Maybe he just happened to be heading the same way. That's what I told myself. Just a misunderstanding. Chloe stumbled and I yanked her up. There was no time to look back. I could feel him there, a weight in the air behind us, and my skin crawled with the idea of that hatchet swinging closer. The trail marker appeared through the trees, a little wooden building with a rusted roof. Almost there, almost safe. But the footsteps didn't stop. They were steady, unhurried, like he knew we had nowhere else to go. We slammed through the door of the info post and I threw the bolt lock so hard it bent. Chloe collapsed against the wall, and I just stood there gasping, listening. Silence. That deep, heavy silence that presses on your ears after you've been running. Sweat was dripping into my eyes and the whole room stank of old wood and our own fear. I grabbed Chloe's phone because mine was dead and dialed 911. The operator's voice was calm, telling us to stay put. Deputies were on the way. We sat on the dusty floor, not talking, just straining to hear anything outside. Every creak of the building settled into my spine. After what felt like hours, we heard it, the crunch of tires on gravel. Then the sheriff's radio hissing some code I couldn't make out, a static burst of 1032. I almost cried. The deputies searched the perimeter with flashlights, but the man was gone. Just gone. They put us in the back of the patrol car with scratchy wool blankets. I kept looking out the window at the tree line, my hands shaking. One deputy asked if maybe we just panicked, if he was just a hiker who seemed weird. I started to agree, you know, maybe we exaggerated. But yeah, that silence before the sirens. It was the worst part, because out there in the dark, my ears kept telling me someone was still breathing just beyond the light. They found him that evening, a mile down the service road, sitting in his blue sedan like he was waiting for a bus. The deputy said he didn't even try to run. He just put his hands on the wheel and stared straight ahead. What they found in the car, I mean, we only heard it later while we were giving our statements. The trunk was packed with women's clothes, different sizes, all folded neat. Passports, multiple passports with different names and faces, all young women. And there was an old chainsaw still smelling sour with old fuel, and something worse, something rotting. One of the deputies laid a passport photo on the table. Catherine Wells, missing since 2008. I recognized the jacket she wore in the photo. It was a faded blue Carhartt, just like his. Maybe he was just a crazy collector, I thought, grasping at anything. But then the deputy looked at us and said, "Girls, you have no idea how lucky you are." I guess we do now. The word on our hood, hello, it wasn't a threat. It was how he started. A greeting before the game. I sat there in that cold station, and the numbness slowly cracked open, and I could feel something cold spreading under my skin, something that I knew would never wash off. So yeah, he's in prison now. Case closed. But for us, it never really ended. I can't see a blue jacket in a crowd without my heart slamming against my ribs. It's stupid, I know. The world's full of blue jackets. But my body doesn't care. It remembers. Chloe sold the Corolla a month later. She said she couldn't look at that scratched up hood anymore. I moved to Idaho as far from trees as I could get. But at night the dream comes back. The pine smell, the metallic glint of that hatchet, and him asking about the chainsaw in that flat, patient voice. Sometimes I wake up to a whisper, some half-heard word that sounds like my name. I check the windows, but I'm on the third floor. It's just nerves. Time heals, right? That's what everyone says. Last winter, I found an old receipt in the pocket of a jacket I hadn't worn in months. From that gas station, the one at the edge of the Willamette. The paper was crumbling, and the smell of pine rose off it like it was fresh. I threw it in the trash. But yeah, I still check my back seat every time. I guess that forest never really left us. Because sometimes when the building settles at night, I hear a sound like someone scratching at glass. Just once. And I tell myself it's a branch, wind, nothing. But I always lie there awake until dawn. So anyway, me and my buddy Mark and my cousin Danny were out in the Maine woods in early October 2011. We'd taken Danny's old Toyota 4Runner as far up the logging trails as it would go, then hiked in maybe 3 more miles to a clearing near a stream. The plan was 2 nights of camping, some fishing, just clearing our heads. I mean, we were soaked before the sun even went down. A real hard, cold rain came sideways through the trees and just flattened our tent. The poles snapped clean in 2 places. We stood there in the dark, muddy water creeping into our boots, looking at the wreck of it. We thought the storm was the worst thing that could happen to us that night. We had no idea the real danger was already waiting inside those walls. We remembered this old hunting cabin we'd passed, maybe a couple miles back, barely visible from the trail. Mark said it looked abandoned, but at least it had a roof. Better than sitting under a pine tree all night. We grabbed what we could, sleeping bags and 1 pack with dryish clothes, and started walking. The forest was loud with dripping water and the rustle of wet ferns against our legs. Every so often, a dead branch would crack, and we'd jump and then laugh at ourselves, like we were in some bad horror movie from the 2000s. I kept stepping into puddles I couldn't see, the damp earth sucking at my sneakers. We found the cabin around 11. It was small, dark, all wood with a little porch that sagged. Inside, the air was stale and thick, but the roof held. There was a rusty kerosene lamp on a shelf, and Danny got it lit. In that flickering orange light, I saw the dust on everything, the spider webs and old metal cot. I said it was just an old shack. Nobody's lived here for years. We all kind of nodded, trying to feel better. Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside, we almost felt safe. You know how it is when you walk into a place and your skin just goes tight for no reason? That's how it felt. The door had no lock, just a hook that didn't quite catch. We pushed a bench against it and called it good enough. I noticed a shelf near the window with an old Pepsi can on it. The design faded, the date on the bottom printed 2009. A couple dented soup cans too. Somebody had been here, but not recently. Probably hunters. That's what I told myself. We hung our wet jackets over the chair and laid our sleeping bags on the wooden benches. Danny turned the lamp down low. The rain on the roof was steady, a white noise that should have been calming. But after a few minutes of lying there, I started hearing something else underneath it. Not footsteps, not talking. Just the faintest whisper, like breath moving through a crack in the wall. I held my own breath to listen. Nothing. Probably just wind through the boards. Mark whispered that it's just rats. I guess it was nothing. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep, but the air itself felt heavy, like it was pushing down on my chest. There was a smell too, something sour underneath the old wood smell, a little like rot. I turned on my side and faced the door. In the dark, I couldn't stop imagining that hook sliding free on its own. I told myself it was just my brain being stupid, but for a long time before I finally drifted off, I could feel something waiting. Just waiting. I woke up to a sound I knew right away didn't belong. Not rain, not wind. A slow, deliberate scratch on glass. It came from the little window above the cot, right next to where Danny was sleeping. I lay frozen, listening. It came again. 1, 2, 3 drags of something sharp, like fingernails. I mean, it could have been anything, but it was too rhythmic, too patient. Then a whisper. Low, rough, right outside the wood. Words I couldn't make out. Danny's eyes snapped open and he fumbled for the mag light in his bag. The click of the flashlight was loud as a gunshot. He pointed it at the window, but the beam caught nothing but rain and black branches. He held a finger to his lips. For a long moment, everything was still. Then 3 knocks hit the glass. Slow, heavy. I whispered, maybe it's just a person, someone lost who wants to come in. Even as I said it, I didn't believe it. Mark sat up, rigid. Nobody moved toward the door. The scratching started again, but now it was moving. From the front window, it slid along the wall, dragging across the wood. And then it was at the side window, the one we couldn't see from where we sat. And then, like all of a sudden, the whisper came from over there too. Not one voice, 2. I couldn't feel my fingers. My heart was beating so hard I could see the pulse in my vision. And then the scratching stopped. The silence that came after was worse. We sat in the dark for maybe a minute after the scratching stopped. The silence was so complete I could hear water dripping from the roof behind us, each drop a tiny crack in the quiet. Danny clicked the mag light off and on again, like he was checking it still worked. Mark whispered that we couldn't stay there waiting to find out what was outside. He was right. We grabbed the flashlights, pulled our wet jackets on, and pushed the bench away from the door. I remember my hands were shaking so bad I could barely zip my coat. We stepped out onto the sagging porch. The rain had stopped, but the trees were still shedding heavy drops. Danny swept his light across the clearing, and then he froze. I followed the beam and saw them. At the tree line, maybe 30 yards out, 5 figures stood perfectly still. They wore dark, grimy clothes, hoods pulled low. I couldn't see any faces, just the shapes of them against the black trunks. Like they didn't move an inch, not a shuffle, not a turn, just standing there facing us. Mark yelled something at them, maybe hey or who's there? Nothing. No reaction at all. You know, I thought I was seeing things, that maybe my mind was putting people where there were just stumps. Then one of them tilted its head, just a little, and a dry branch cracked somewhere off to the left, like something had stepped on it. I stopped breathing. Danny grabbed my arm and hissed that the keys were in his pocket. The Ford Explorer was on the other side of the woods, and we had to go now. We backed into the cabin, grabbed whatever bags we could, and then we ran. We crashed through the wet undergrowth with nothing but flashlight beams jumping ahead of us. Behind us, the footsteps started almost right away. Not running exactly, but steady, breaking twigs and rustling ferns. I tried to tell myself it was just deer we'd spooked, maybe a whole herd of them moving in our direction. So we just ran, you know, like your feet move on their own, and your brain is just along for the ride. My left sneaker had come untied at some point, the lace whipping around my ankle, but I didn't dare stop. Danny was a little ahead, Mark right behind me, his breath loud and ragged. The beams lit up slick tree trunks and low branches that kept clawing at my face. I hit a root hard and went down, my knee slamming into a rock. A jolt went through me, and I tasted metal, sharp and hot at the back of my throat, like I'd bitten my tongue, or maybe it was just adrenaline. Mark yanked me up, hooked an arm under my shoulder, and we kept going. I glanced back once and saw the flashlight catch movement, dark forms weaving between the trees, closer than before. I mean, I couldn't feel my legs anymore, just a numb, pumping motion. The woods seemed to stretch forever, every direction the same wet black wall. Then Danny shouted that he saw a gap, a lighter patch through the branches, the road. We burst out onto the gravel shoulder and doubled over, gasping. For a second, I thought we'd made it. Then I heard the footsteps again, slower now, but still coming through the dark. The Explorer sat right where we'd left it, but something was wrong. The ground underneath it was wet, but not just from rain. I saw the gleam of a puddle that spread out too far, too dark. Danny ran to the driver's side and stopped cold. The tires were slashed to ribbons, the rubber hanging in strips. Under the chassis, a cut brake line dripped slow and steady, a metallic smell mixing with the damp earth. A rusty folding knife with a wooden handle lay in the gravel by the rear wheel like a calling card. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't random. This was a trap. From the tree line we just left, I heard a low voice call out something, then another laugh. My brain tried to feed me a lie, that maybe some vandals had just wrecked the truck for kicks and split, but the footsteps were getting louder. Mark didn't say a word. He just pointed to the ditch on the other side of the road, a shallow gully carved by runoff, and we slid down into it. The mud was cold and soft, soaking through my jeans instantly. We pressed ourselves into the slope and went still. The footsteps stopped right above us. I could hear breathing, heavy and thick. A voice, raspy and too close, asked where they went. Another answered, a little farther off, that they couldn't have gone far. A shadow fell across the ferns above our heads. I squeezed my eyes shut and held my breath until my chest burned. The damp earth smell filled my nose, mixed with the faint, chemical tang of brake fluid. I could hear boots shifting on the gravel just inches away. Then the voice came again, quieter now, almost amused. "We know you're close." I pressed my face deeper into the mud and waited. I don't know how long we lay there, maybe half an hour. Eventually the footsteps retreated, fading back into the forest one by one, until all that was left was the silence and the dust of the road drifting in the beam of a flashlight we dropped. We didn't move until the sky began to gray. When the first real light came, we crawled out of that ditch covered in mud, shaking so hard we could barely stand. We flagged down a truck driver, a guy in a Peterbilt with a main patch on his shoulder. He took one look at us and didn't ask many questions. The police came, searched the cabin, but they found nothing. A dirty mattress, a pile of old clothes, some empty cans. No fingerprints but ours, no knife. The cop who talked to us said that sometimes homeless groups winter in those woods, bands of them who hunt for supplies. He didn't say people, but I knew. I guess we were just lucky. That's what people tell me. No physical scars, nothing to show for it, except the way I sleep now, with a light on, and how I flinch when rain scratches against the window. The officer closed the file with no suspects. No one was ever caught. But yeah, you never really stop looking over your shoulder. They didn't find those people. The cabin still stands out there, empty, dark, door hanging open. That door never got locked. It's still waiting. I met Jake in the summer of 2019 on an app called Heart to Heart. I was 24, living in Sacramento, and honestly, just bored and swiping. His profile was nothing special, a few hiking pics, a quote from some indie band, but his messages were different. He was funny, attentive, and asked all the right questions. After a few weeks of that, he proposed something that felt straight out of a movie. A midnight hike to watch the Perseid meteor shower on private land his uncle owned up near Placerville. I didn't know then that the most romantic gesture of my life would turn into a nightmare I still can't wake up from. I mean, I was excited, but there was this little knot in my stomach I couldn't shake. I told myself it was just first date nerves. So I did the only thing that made sense. I called Mike and Lena and made them promise to tail us. I gave them the coordinates and told them to stay close enough to hear if something went wrong. They thought I was being paranoid, but they agreed. That night, I drove my green Subaru Outback to a gas station off Highway 50. Jake was waiting, leaning against a dusty Ford Explorer. He hugged me a little too long, and then we tossed my bag and back. We turned off the road onto a skinny dirt track lined with eucalyptus. The rustle of those leaves, that dry, shivery whisper, was all I could hear outside the window. I watched the trees blur past and felt that knot pull tighter. Jake just hummed along to some old rock song. When we finally pulled up to the trailhead, the headlights swept across a clearing and died. It was dead quiet, except for the eucalyptus rustle and the thud of my own heart in my ears. So anyway, the drive itself was where things started to feel off. I guess I should backtrack a bit. He picked me up in that dusty 2006 Ford Explorer, and we headed out of town. The radio was set to some classic rock station, and pretty soon that song The Chain by Fleetwood Mac came on. You know, the one with the long bass solo. Jake just hummed along and tapped the steering wheel, and I remember thinking, okay, this is nice. But then the road turned to dirt, and the car started bouncing. I caught a whiff of damp earth through the open window, that heavy, wet leaf smell you get in the woods. And then we hit a pothole, and I heard it. A metallic clink from the back, like tools shifting around. I glanced behind me, but he just said, "Oh, that's my camping gear, don't worry." And then the joke started. He pointed out a rocky ravine and said, "You could dump a body there and no one would ever find it." I laughed it off, like you do. He kept going, talking about how acid leaves too much evidence, but lie was cleaner. I tried to chuckle, but my throat was dry. Then he said something about a river of blood near the old quarry up ahead. I told myself he was just a dark-humored guy testing my limits. That's all it was. The road got narrower and rougher. My phone signal flickered from 2 bars to 1 to nothing. The trees closed in. The headlights only showed shadows. Jake stopped humming. The radio dissolved into static, and the smell of damp earth seemed to get stronger, wetter. I clutched my dead phone, my heart pounding so loud I was sure he could hear it, and thought about Mike and Lena somewhere behind us, praying they hadn't lost the trail. And then, without warning, the car lurched over a deep rut. I felt the frame shudder, and he cut the engine. Silence swallowed everything. We got out of the Explorer into the moonlight. The air was cooler, and that damp earth smell was still there. But now something sour mingled in, like chemicals or old vinegar. You know that sharp, rotting smell? I tried not to breathe it in too deep. Jake handed me a little LED flashlight, but it was already flickering. He said the batteries were low. Just shake it, it'll come back. His own light beam wobbled as he led us away from the car, down a faint trail between the trees. I kept my phone in my pocket, useless without a signal, but it felt like a lifeline anyway. Then he stopped and pointed the light straight ahead into a gaping hole. "That's the old quarry," he said. His voice was flat. He added that no one would hear a scream down there. Just like that. Casual. I forced a laugh, but my stomach dropped. In the moonlight, I could see the glint of his backpack and the edge of something plastic, like a folded sheet sticking out the side. I told myself it was probably a rain poncho or a tarp. Probably. An owl hooted somewhere close, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. The sound echoed and then died. The silence that followed was heavy, unnatural, not even the rustle of leaves. Jake just smirked and said, "Probably a raccoon, or the wind." I nodded, but I didn't believe him. I kept walking, but my mind was racing. I thought about Mike and Lena out there in the dark, maybe 100 yards back. I clung to that hope like a rock, but with each step, the sour smell got thicker, stinging my nose. By now, the sour odor was inescapable, a chemical tang that coated my throat. Jake's flashlight flickered again, and for a second, everything went black. In that darkness, I heard nothing but my own blood pounding. Then the beam sputtered back. We finally reached the edge of the quarry. It was this gaping black hole in the earth, and the sour chemical smell hit me like a wall. It burned my eyes and throat. I wrapped my arms around myself and told Jake I was cold. I said we should head back. You know, maybe the meteor shower wasn't going to happen anyway. That's when the whole night tilted. His face just shut off. No more smile. His eyes went flat, like pebbles. He grabbed my wrist. Hard, not a playful grab. A twisting, grinding grip that made my bones creak. He leaned in so close I could see the pores on his nose, and he whispered that we weren't done. I felt his breath on my cheek, hot and sour, the same chemical stench. I looked down, and my blood froze. There, on his belt, was the black handle of a buck knife. And as he shifted his weight, I heard a tiny metallic click. His thumb had snapped open the retention strap. The knife was ready. Behind him, his backpack gaped, and the dying flashlight caught the unmistakable shine of silver duct tape. I guess my brain scrambled for any excuse. Maybe he's just taking the dark humor way too far. Maybe this is some stupid scare prank he thinks is romantic. I tried to laugh, but it came out as a strangled squeak. I babbled that my friends knew exactly where I was, that they were probably already on their way. His eyes narrowed, and he didn't buy it for a second. Then from the dark trees exactly behind me, I heard it, a sharp, deliberate crack of a branch. Not the random snap of a raccoon or the wind. This was loud, purposeful, human. The signal, Mike and Lena. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I thought I might pass out. Jake's head whipped toward the sound, and for one tiny second, his grip loosened. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just stood there, every nerve screaming, praying their flashlights would cut through the trees. And then everything went blank. The hope, the terror, all of it swallowed by that single deafening roar in my ears. Two mag-light beams cut through the trees like searchlights. And then everything exploded. Mike and Lena burst out of the dark, both of them screaming at Jake to let me go. I'd never been so happy to hear my friends' voices, but Jake didn't hesitate. With a violent yank, he pulled the buck knife from his belt and pressed the cold blade against my throat. I could smell the sweat on him, sharp and sour, mixing with the chemical stink from before. The metal bit into my skin. For a split second, I just froze. But the distraction was enough. Jake's focus shifted toward them, and in that heartbeat, I twisted hard, ramming my elbow into his ribs. The knife slipped away from my neck, and I stumbled forward into Lena's arms. She dragged me back, and Mike stepped in front with a heavy branch. Jake squared up, blade still in hand, eyes darting. Then he saw Mike's branch, saw Lena standing firm, saw me already out of reach. He spat a curse, something guttural and ugly, and then the echo of it bounced off the quarry walls. He turned and bolted into the pitch-black forest. The last thing I heard was his footsteps crashing through the underbrush, fainter and fainter, then nothing but silence. We didn't wait. So anyway, I just started running. We stumbled back down the trail, tripping over roots, flashlights bouncing. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely unlock my phone. It took 3 tries before the call went through. 1 bar, just enough. The 911 dispatcher's voice crackled through, asking what my emergency was. I spat out that a man with a knife had attacked us and fled into the woods. They logged the call at 11:47 p.m. We reached the Explorer. Mike found the keys on the ground where Jake must have dropped them. We all piled in, locked every door, and sat there in the dark, sobbing and shaking. The smell of sweat filled the cab, and I just kept listening for footsteps. I mean, the next few hours are a blur. We sat in the Explorer until red and blue lights cut through the trees. Deputies arrived, and then a K9 unit. I remember the buzzing of a police radio crackling from a patrol car, a sound that drilled into my skull while I gave my statement. They brought us stale coffee in paper cups. That bitter, burnt smell is something I still can't stomach. The dog picked up Jake's scent and pulled hard into the woods. I watched them disappear, my whole body trembling. They searched for hours, but later they told me the dog lost the trail at a creek. Cold water kills a scent. They found his abandoned Explorer with the keys on the ground, but Jake himself was gone. Then a detective sat me down in a tiny room at the station. You know, that kind of room with no windows and a single light. He had a thin folder and a tired expression. He told me that Jake wasn't Jake. His real name was Brian Keller. He was already wanted for 2 previous hiking attacks up north. One of the victims didn't survive. I couldn't process it. My brain just stopped. They also found his actual car, a 2013 Toyota Camry, parked on a fire road about a mile away. Inside the Explorer, they pulled out zip ties, rolls of duct tape, and a gallon jug of muriatic acid. Acid, the chemical I'd been smelling the whole time. It wasn't a joke. It was never a joke. The false trail my mind had clung to, maybe he's just a creep with dark humor, shattered into a million pieces. I sat there staring at the detective's coffee stain on the table, and it hit me like a physical blow. If Mike and Lena hadn't been there, if that branch hadn't snapped at exactly the right moment, I'd just be another missing hiker, another photo on a bulletin board. The buzzing radio in the background never stopped, and I just stared, numb. Weeks went by, but I didn't go back to my apartment. I stayed at my parents' place, got a new phone number, and tried to disappear. But yeah, I guess I knew deep down that it wasn't over. I just didn't know how soon. One night around 2 a.m., I was lying in my childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling. I hadn't slept properly in days. The house was silent, except for the occasional creak of floorboards settling. Then I saw headlights sweep across my wall. A car engine idled somewhere down the street. A low, distant rumble. I held my breath. After a minute, the engine cut off. No doors open, nothing. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe a neighbor getting home late. He's gone, move on. That's what everyone said. Then my phone buzzed. The new phone, the number only my parents and a few close friends had, a text from an unknown number. I opened it and my heart stopped. It was a photo of this house, my parents' house, taken from the street. The night mode on an iPhone makes everything that creepy greenish gray. I could see my bedroom window, the light still on inside. Under the photo, the caption read, "I know where you live, Sophie." My hands went numb. I stared at those words, and the floorboards creaked somewhere below me, like a footstep. I whispered to myself that it was just the old house, just the wind, but I didn't believe it. So anyway, I called 911. The dispatcher was calm, took the report. They traced the text to a burner phone, probably bought with cash. They gave me case number 210874 and told me to lock the doors and stay inside. No sign of him. After the call, I just sat on my bed, knees pulled to my chest, staring at the window. The streetlight outside cast long shadows of tree branches that looked like reaching hands. I haven't slept a full night since. Every distant engine, every creak, every buzz of my phone sends ice through my veins. He's still out there, and he knows exactly where I am.